Good evening and welcome. Find a comfortable place to settle in as we prepare to drift back in time to a world of myth, legend, and the very dawn of written history. Tonight, we will journey to the ancient land of Mesopotamia, a place cradled between the mighty Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and explore one of the oldest and most profound stories ever told, the Epic of Gilgamesh. This is more than just a tale of a king. It is a tapestry woven from the deepest human questions about life, death, and what it means to be remembered. We begin not with the hero himself, but with the world from which he emerged. Imagine the year as approximately 2100 BCE, though the stories themselves were passed down for centuries before being written. The world is Sumeria, and its great cities like Uruk are rising from the dusty plains, their ziggurats reaching for the sky. These cities are not just collections of homes, they are centers of commerce, culture, and power, bustling with life. Picture the sun setting, casting long shadows across mud brick walls and the busy markets where merchants trade grain and lapis lazuli. The air is warm and dry, carrying the faint scent of baking bread and the distant hum of daily work. This is the birthplace of civilization as we know it, the place where the wheel was invented, where the first writing system, cuneiform, took form, and where this monumental story was first inscribed onto clay tablets. As we settle in, let your mind become a blank slate, much like the clay tablets of old, ready to receive the impressions of this ancient narrative. This story we are about to explore is not a single, polished work, but a compilation, a mosaic of tales told and retold. It was not found in a grand library, but pieced together by modern scholars from fragments buried for millennia, a silent testament to its own endurance. The journey to rediscover this epic is a story in itself, a quiet, scholarly adventure spanning centuries. We owe much to the meticulous work of archaeologists and linguists who, with infinite patience, reassembled the puzzle, bringing Gilgamesh back to life from the dust of forgotten cities. The British Museum, in particular, became the modern home for many of these tablets, salvaged from the ruins of ancient Assyrian libraries. Our guide tonight is a gentle voice, a quiet companion on this historical and mythological expedition. We won't rush through the battles or the heartbreaks. Instead, we will linger on the details, the culture, the philosophical underpinnings of this profound work. We will feel the heat of the Mesopotamian sun and the cold despair of a world without a friend. We will understand the very human struggle against mortality, a theme that transcends time and connects us directly to these people from so long ago. The story of Gilgamesh speaks to the universal desire for meaning, the search for immortality, and the acceptance of our place in the grand cycle of existence. It is a story not about what makes us godlike, but what makes us fundamentally human. So, as the day's worries begin to recede, let yourself sink into the comfort of the present moment. Release any tension you might be holding. The great ziggurats of Uruk are waiting for us, their silent stones ready to share their secrets. We will walk through the teeming streets, witness the reign of a king who was both a man and a god, and follow him on an odyssey far grander than any earthly journey. This is a story of friendship, of loss, and of a king who learned that true immortality lies not in escaping death, but in living a life worthy of being remembered. Tonight, we will journey together, carried on the gentle current of history, into the dreamlike landscape of ancient Mesopotamia. We begin our journey by stepping into the heart of the ancient world, into the city of Uruk. Imagine yourself standing on the city's outer walls, which, according to the epic, were of a magnificence and scale that amazed all who saw them. These were not just fortifications, they were a symbol of a city at the pinnacle of its power, a testament to human ingenuity and communal labor. The walls, described as being made of baked brick, rise majestically from the flat, alluvial plain of Mesopotamia. Look out from atop these ramparts, and you can see a city teeming with life. Below, the narrow, winding streets are filled with the daily rhythms of an ancient metropolis. The air is filled with a mixture of dust, the scent of cooking fires, and the sounds of countless people living their lives. Uruk, at this point in our story, is a city of immense significance. It is one of the oldest cities in the world, a true cradle of urban life. As you look out over its expanse, you can see the distinctive silhouette of the ziggurat, a stepped temple tower that serves as the city's spiritual and architectural centerpiece. This ziggurat is dedicated to the goddess Ishtar, the patron deity of Uruk, a goddess of love, war, and fertility. Her presence permeates the city's culture and daily life. The temple precinct itself is a hive of activity, a place where priests and priestesses perform rituals, where offerings are made, and where the gods are believed to interact most directly with the mortal world. But our focus tonight is not on the city itself, but on its ruler. His name is Gilgamesh, and his reign is the central axis of our tale. According to the epic, he is a figure of almost unimaginable power and stature, a king who is 2/3 god and 1/3 man. This divine lineage grants him a strength and a beauty that set him apart from all others. He is a force of nature, a being of unmatched physical prowess and charismatic presence. However, this power and divinity have come at a cost to his subjects. In the early part of our story, Gilgamesh is a tyrant. He is not a benevolent king, but a self-absorbed ruler whose authority knows no bounds. The people of Uruk live in a state of constant fear and exhaustion. The epic describes how Gilgamesh uses his immense strength not to protect his city, but to oppress its citizens. The young men of Uruk are conscripted into endless, arduous labor, building and rebuilding the very walls we stand on. The young women are not safe from his royal whim either, as he exercises a droit du seigneur, a claim on the brides of his city on their wedding night. The city, despite its splendor, is groaning under the weight of his tyranny. The citizens are filled with despair, their pleas and laments rising to the heavens like smoke from a distant fire. They have no earthly recourse, for who can stand against a king who is 2/3 God? As you listen to the distant sounds of the city, try to feel the weight of this oppression. Imagine the sense of helplessness felt by the people of Uruk, trapped in their beautiful grand city with a ruler who is more a force of destruction than of order. This is the starting point of our narrative. A city in distress, a king out of balance, and a population desperate for a hero to save them, or at least a force strong enough to temper their ruler's unbridled power. The stage is set for a dramatic intervention, a moment that will change Gilgamesh's life and set him on a path he never anticipated. The quiet whispers of the citizens are not falling on deaf ears. The gods, watching from their celestial abode, are hearing their prayers and are about to take action. The laments of Uruk's people, rising like a collective prayer, do not go unheard. High above the mortal world, in the celestial realm, the great gods convene. They listen to the pleas of the weary citizens and acknowledge the grave injustice being perpetrated by Gilgamesh. The gods, in this ancient cosmology, are not distant or uninterested. They are intricately involved in the affairs of humanity, often shaping destinies and responding to the cries of their creations. It is the goddess Aruru, the goddess of creation, who is tasked with a monumental mission. She is commanded to create a being who can stand as an equal to Gilgamesh, a force of nature that can check his unchecked power. Imagine Aruru, sitting upon her divine throne, her hands molding clay from the wild earth, much like a potter at a wheel. From this primordial clay, she crafts a being of immense strength and wild beauty. This is Enkidu. He is not born in a city or a home, but in the wilderness, the untamed world far from the walls of Uruk. The epic describes him as a creature of pure, raw nature. His body is covered in hair. His hair is as long as a woman's, and he lives in perfect harmony with the animals of the steppe. He eats grass with the gazelles, drinks from the watering hole with the herds, and runs free with the wild creatures of the land. He is a noble savage, a figure representing a time before the complexities and constraints of civilization. Enkidu's existence is a stark contrast to Gilgamesh's. While Gilgamesh is a product of the city, a symbol of its power and its flaws, Enkidu embodies the untamed, natural world. He is pure instinct, unburdened by the rules of society or the weight of power. His very presence disrupts the natural order of the wilderness. A hunter, a trapper, whose livelihood depends on catching the animals of the plains, is repeatedly thwarted by Enkidu, who breaks his traps and frees the beasts. The hunter is terrified and frustrated. He sees in Enkidu a force beyond his comprehension, a being who is both man and animal, a guardian of the wild. Overcome with fear and unable to fulfill his duties, the hunter returns to Uruk to seek advice from the king himself. He recounts the strange, powerful figure he has seen, a man who moves with the strength and grace of the wild herds. Gilgamesh, intrigued by this report, devises a plan. He will not send a warrior to subdue this wild man, but a person who represents the very essence of civilization and its allure. He sends Shamhat, a temple prostitute, to the wilderness to meet Enkidu. The term prostitute in this context holds a different meaning than in our modern understanding. Shamhat is a priestess of the goddess Ishtar, trained in the arts of love and civilized grace. Her role is not just physical, it is symbolic. She is the embodiment of human culture, sophistication, and connection. The meeting of Shamhat and Enkidu is a pivotal moment in the narrative. For 6 days and 7 nights, they are together, and in that time, Shamhat introduces Enkidu to the ways of humanity. She teaches him about food, about drink, about the intimacy that is unique to humans. Through their encounter, Enkidu sheds his wildness. He loses his pure connection to the animals. They no longer recognize him as one of their own, and they flee from him. In losing his wild innocence, he gains a new kind of awareness. His mind expands, and he begins to understand the complex world of human consciousness. He learns about Gilgamesh and his tyranny and feels a stirring in his heart, a newfound sense of justice and purpose. The process of his civilizing is a quiet, profound transformation, a journey from a state of pure nature to one of self-awareness and social belonging. With his newfound humanity and consciousness, Enkidu is no longer a creature of the wild. He has a purpose, a destination. Shamhat, the priestess, guides him toward the great city of Uruk, the very place he was created to challenge. As they journey, she speaks of the city's splendor and of the immense, almost godlike king who rules it. Enkidu, now filled with a sense of justice, is eager to confront this tyrant and bring balance back to the world. He has heard the stories of Gilgamesh's oppression, and he feels a deep-seated need to protect the vulnerable. The arrival of Enkidu in Uruk is a momentous occasion. Imagine the quiet streets of the city. Suddenly, a figure unlike any they have ever seen appears, a man of immense stature and power, yet with the innocence of the wilderness in his eyes. The citizens are awestruck. They see in him not just a man, but a potential savior, a physical manifestation of their hope for a more just rule. The news of this wild man's arrival quickly reaches Gilgamesh, who is already prepared. He has had dreams, prophetic visions of a celestial axe and a falling star, which his mother, the goddess Ninsun, has interpreted for him. She foretold that a mighty companion, an equal, would soon arrive. The two titans finally meet. The epic describes this encounter with a palpable sense of tension and raw power. Their first interaction is not one of friendship, but of fierce combat. Enkidu, driven by the desire to end Gilgamesh's tyranny, stands in the doorway of the public square, blocking Gilgamesh's path to a wedding celebration where he intends to exercise his oppressive rights. It is a symbolic confrontation, a clash between the untamed forces of nature and the arrogant power of civilization. The fight that follows is a spectacle of epic proportions. The ground shakes, the walls of the city tremble. It is a battle of equals, a storm of fists and fury. Neither warrior can gain the upper hand. Gilgamesh's divine strength is matched by Enkidu's wild, primal power. They wrestle for a long time, locked in a brutal embrace, each pushing the other to their absolute limits. But as the fight continues, a shift occurs. It is not a moment of victory, but one of mutual respect. Gilgamesh, a being who has never known an equal, finds in Enkidu a worthy opponent, someone who can challenge him not just physically, but as a peer. Enkidu, in turn, recognizes the immense power and hidden nobility within Gilgamesh. The battle ends not in a defeat, but in a quiet cessation, a moment of profound recognition. After the struggle, Gilgamesh acknowledges Enkidu's strength and worth. Instead of anger, he feels admiration. He says to Enkidu, "Your mother is a mountain cow, and your father is a wild stag." This is not an insult, but a compliment, an acknowledgement of Enkidu's wild, noble origins. The two embrace, and in that simple act, a bond is forged. It is a friendship that will define the rest of their lives. The tyrant of Uruk is no more. He has been tempered by the friendship of his equal. The oppressive reign ends not with a violent overthrow, but with a quiet transformation of the king's heart. Gilgamesh now has a companion who can hold him accountable, a friend who can share his burdens and his adventures. This friendship is the central relationship of the entire epic, and it is the catalyst for Gilgamesh's transformation from a selfish ruler to a true hero. With their friendship forged, Gilgamesh and Enkidu are now inseparable. The city of Uruk no longer fears its king. Instead, it watches with a quiet sense of hope as its ruler embarks on a new path, guided by his new companion. Gilgamesh, no longer content with idle tyranny, seeks glory that will echo through the ages. He turns to Enkidu and proposes a grand adventure, a quest that will test their strength and immortalize their names. The plan is to journey to a distant and forbidden place, the Cedar Forest. Imagine this forest not as a simple wooded area, but as a mythical landscape, a sacred grove guarded by the gods themselves. It is the domain of Humbaba, a terrifying giant appointed by the god Enlil to protect the forest from mortals. Humbaba is not just a monster, he is the embodiment of natural force and divine wrath. The epic describes him with vivid, terrifying detail. His face is a tangled mess of entrails, his roar is a flood, his mouth is fire, and his breath is death itself. To enter the Cedar Forest is to trespass on the god's territory, and to face Humbaba is to face a certain gruesome end. Gilgamesh's proposal is met with fear and caution from the city elders and even from Enkidu, who knows the wilderness and understands the true power of Humbaba. Enkidu tries to dissuade his friend, warning him of the monster's immense power and the divine punishment that awaits them. But Gilgamesh, driven by a thirst for glory and a newfound courage, will not be deterred. He speaks of the human condition, of the inevitability of death, and the only way to triumph over it, by creating a legacy that will last forever. He says, "I will cut down the cedar, and my name will be remembered for all time." Preparations for the journey are meticulous. The city provides them with weapons and supplies. Gilgamesh makes a pilgrimage to his mother, the goddess Ninsun, who makes a desperate plea to the sun god Shamash to protect her son. Shamash, who has a special affection for Gilgamesh, agrees to help, promising to send powerful winds to aid them in their battle. This divine intervention underscores the epic nature of their quest. This is no ordinary hunt, but a journey sanctioned by the heavens. The journey to the Cedar Forest is long and arduous. They travel for days and weeks, covering vast distances across the wild plains. The epic details their travels with poetic imagery, describing how they dig wells and make offerings to the gods at the end of each day. At night, they dream. Gilgamesh, plagued by terrifying visions, is comforted by Enkidu, who interprets the dreams favorably, turning nightmares of mountains and fire into prophecies of victory and glory. This ritual of dreaming and interpretation highlights the deep trust and codependence that have grown between them. Finally, they arrive at the Cedar Forest. The air changes. It is filled with the fragrant, intoxicating scent of cedar. The silence is profound, broken only by the whispers of the wind through the ancient trees. As they enter, they are confronted by Humbaba, the terrifying guardian. The battle that ensues is a chaotic storm of divine fury and mortal courage. Humbaba's roars shake the earth, and his attacks are like a storm. But with the help of Shamash, who sends 13 great winds to pin Humbaba down, Gilgamesh and Enkidu are able to fight back. Humbaba pleads for his life, offering to be their servant, but Enkidu, remembering the monster's cruelty, urges Gilgamesh to show no mercy. Driven by the fear of divine retribution and the desire for everlasting glory, Gilgamesh slays Humbaba, and together they cut down the sacred trees, creating a raft to carry their triumphant return to Uruk. Triumphant and laden with the spoils of their victory, the sacred cedar, Gilgamesh and Enkidu return to Uruk. The city celebrates its heroes. The oppressive king is now a celebrated warrior, and his companion, the wild man, is an honored guest. The people cheer for them, and their fame spreads far and wide. The scent of cedar fills the air of Uruk, a fragrant reminder of their incredible achievement. In the midst of this celebration, Gilgamesh, filled with a sense of his own power and importance, cleanses himself and dons his royal robes. The epic describes him as a vision of radiant masculinity, his beauty shining like a star. This newfound glory attracts the attention of the gods themselves, specifically the goddess Ishtar, the patron of Uruk and the very deity whose ziggurat dominates the city's skyline. Ishtar, a goddess of love and war, is captivated by Gilgamesh's beauty and strength. She appears to him and proposes marriage, offering him a life of immense wealth and power. Imagine the scene. Gilgamesh stands before the goddess, who promises him a chariot of lapis lazuli and gold, divine protection, and a life of eternal splendor. It is an offer that no mortal king would dare refuse. But Gilgamesh, having just returned from facing down a divine guardian and having been humbled by his friendship with Enkidu, has a new perspective. He is no longer the reckless tyrant, but a man who has learned the consequences of disrespecting the divine. He sees through Ishtar's promises. In a powerful and shocking moment, Gilgamesh rejects her offer. His rejection is not a simple no. It is a scathing indictment of her past lovers, a list of all the terrible fates that befell those who became her consorts. He reminds her of the shepherd who was turned into a wolf, the farmer who was turned into a mole, and even the beautiful bird who was turned into a broken-winged creature. His words are harsh and filled with a raw, mortal contempt for her fickle and often cruel nature. He exposes her for what she is, a capricious and dangerous goddess whose love brings only ruin. Ishtar, her pride wounded and her anger ignited by this mortal's audacious rejection, flies into a rage. She ascends to the heavens and weeps before her father, the great god Anu. She demands vengeance, begging him to unleash the bull of heaven upon Uruk. This bull is no ordinary beast. It is a force of famine and destruction, a monstrous creature of divine power. Anu is hesitant, warning his daughter of the terrible consequences this would have for the city and its people. But Ishtar's fury is so great that she threatens to break open the gates of the underworld and let the dead loose. Fearing this greater catastrophe, Anu relents and unleashes the bull. The bull of heaven descends upon Uruk, bringing with it a devastating plague and a trail of destruction. Its breath creates chasms in the earth, and with each snort, hundreds of people fall into the abyss. The city is plunged into chaos. The people's fear is now directed not at their king, but at the divine wrath he has provoked. Gilgamesh and Enkidu, however, are undaunted. They rise to the challenge, not for glory, but to protect the city they now both call home. Together, they fight the colossal creature, a battle that is even more intense and dangerous than their fight with Humbaba. They eventually succeed in slaying the bull of heaven, with Enkidu delivering the final, fatal blow. In a final act of defiance, Enkidu tears off the bull's right thigh and hurls it at Ishtar, who is watching from the city walls, taunting her. This act of brazen disrespect, while glorious, seals their fate. The gods will not forgive this hubris. The bold defiance of Gilgamesh and Enkidu, their slaying of the bull of heaven, and Enkidu's subsequent taunt to Ishtar, has a grave consequence. The gods, now thoroughly angered by this mortal hubris, convene in council. Their anger is not directed at Gilgamesh alone, but at the pair. They decide that one of them must die as punishment for their actions. It is a moment of cold, divine justice. The verdict is passed. Enkidu, the friend and companion, must be the one to pay the price. He is, after all, the one who hurled the bull's thigh at the goddess. Gilgamesh's world is about to be turned upside down. As the decree is made, Enkidu falls gravely ill. He is not struck down in battle or by some sudden plague. Instead, he wastes away slowly, tormented by fever and pain. This slow, agonizing death is a deliberate form of divine punishment. It is designed to make both Enkidu and Gilgamesh suffer, to make them witness the slow decay of the physical body and the inevitable end that awaits all mortals. As Enkidu lies on his sickbed, his mind is filled with bitterness and regret. He rails against his fate, cursing the hunter who first found him and the priestess Shamhat who brought him to Uruk. He feels that his journey into civilization has brought him only a painful end, that he would have been better off remaining a wild, untamed creature of the steppe. But in a moment of clarity and kindness, the god Shamash intervenes, reminding Enkidu of the beautiful and fulfilling life he has lived, of the grand friendship he forged with Gilgamesh, and of the fame they have won together. Hearing these words, Enkidu's bitterness melts away, and he recants his curses. He blesses Shamhat for showing him the richness of human life. Gilgamesh, meanwhile, is consumed with grief. He stays by Enkidu's side, holding his hand, pleading with the gods, and trying to will his friend back to health. He is helpless. The king, who once bent the city to his will, who fought monsters and gods, is now powerless against the one true enemy, death. He watches as his beloved companion's strength fades, his body grows frail, and his breath becomes shallow. The death of Enkidu is a profound moment in the epic. As Enkidu takes his final breath, Gilgamesh is left alone with his grief. The epic describes Gilgamesh's reaction with heartbreaking detail. He weeps for 6 days and 7 nights. He refuses to leave his friend's side, holding on to the body, a silent refusal to accept the finality of death. He lets his own hair grow long and shaggy, much like Enkidu's, and dons the skin of a wild beast, a physical manifestation of his profound despair and his return to a more primitive, grief-stricken state. The death of his friend shatters Gilgamesh's worldview. All the glory, all the fame, all the power he has accumulated seems meaningless in the face of this irreversible loss. His earlier quests for fame were a way of challenging mortality, of creating a name that would last forever. But the death of Enkidu, a man he loved more than life itself, brings the terrifying reality of his own mortality into sharp focus. He now understands that if his best friend, his equal, can be taken by death, then so can he. The grief and the fear of his own inevitable end send him on a new and desperate quest. The hero's journey for glory is over. The man's journey to escape death has just begun. Consumed by grief and a profound terror of his own mortality, Gilgamesh's mind is no longer on the affairs of Uruk. The loss of Enkidu has fundamentally changed him, transforming the once arrogant king into a desperate, solitary figure. He is now on a quest far more personal and profound than any before. He seeks to find the secret of eternal life, the one thing that will allow him to defy the cruel fate that took his friend. His new journey is not for glory or fame, but for a solution to the one problem that has no earthly answer: death. His quest leads him to seek out a legendary figure named Utnapishtim, who is said to have survived the Great Flood and was granted immortality by the gods. He is the one mortal who has transcended death, and Gilgamesh believes that if he can find him, he can learn the secret. But the path to Utnapishtim is a long and perilous one, a journey that takes Gilgamesh to the very ends of the earth and beyond. Imagine Gilgamesh, now dressed in the skins of animals, his body thin from travel, and his face gaunt with grief. He wanders through the vast, empty landscapes of the ancient world. The epic describes him crossing dangerous mountain passes and traversing deserts, landscapes that would break an ordinary man. He encounters fearsome creatures, including the terrifying scorpion men and scorpion women who guard the entrance to the mountain of Mashu, the place where the sun rises and sets. These beings, half human and half scorpion, are filled with a divine and unsettling power. They recognize Gilgamesh's divine lineage, but warn him that his journey is futile and impossible for any mortal. Despite their warnings, Gilgamesh's grief and determination are so great that he persists. He convinces the scorpion man to let him pass, and he enters the mountain. He must travel through the mountain's tunnels in total darkness for 12 double hours. This part of the journey is a powerful metaphor for his own descent into the dark abyss of his despair and his fear of death. He is alone, surrounded by an overwhelming darkness, a physical representation of the existential dread that has consumed him. Emerging from the mountain, he finds himself in a beautiful, otherworldly garden, a magical place where jewels and precious stones grow on trees. It is here that he encounters Cedar, the tavern keeper. Cedar, who is also a minor goddess, is frightened by Gilgamesh's wild appearance, but she listens to his story of loss and his desperate quest. She tries to convince him to abandon his search. Her advice is a beautiful and poignant passage about finding joy and meaning in the simple pleasures of life. She tells him to eat, to drink, to be merry, to cherish his wife and children, and to make each day count. This is a moment of profound wisdom, a stark contrast to Gilgamesh's frantic search for a way to escape his fate. But Gilgamesh is not ready to listen. His grief is too raw, his fear too great. He insists on continuing his journey to find Utnapishtim. Cedar, seeing his unwavering resolve, finally gives him directions to a ferryman named Urshanabi, the only one who can navigate the waters of death that separate the mortal world from Utnapishtim's home. With Urshanabi's help, Gilgamesh finally reaches the shore where the immortal man resides, a journey that takes him through treacherous waters filled with supernatural perils. He has arrived at the doorstep of the man who can tell him the secret to eternal life, a man who has witnessed the end of the world. After his arduous journey, Gilgamesh finally arrives on the shores of the faraway land where Utnapishtim, the immortal survivor of the Great Flood, resides. Imagine the sight. A solitary man, weathered by grief and travel, standing before a figure who has seen the world end and begin again. Utnapishtim is not a god, but a man, a mortal granted the rare gift of eternal life. He sees Gilgamesh, recognizes his pain and desperation, and asks him why he has undertaken such a difficult journey. Gilgamesh, still consumed by his fear of death and the sorrow of losing Enkidu, recounts his tale. He speaks of the tyranny of his early reign, the profound friendship he forged with Enkidu, their great adventures, and the devastating, inescapable grief that came with his friend's death. He speaks of his own terror, the realization that he, too, must one day die and become a part of the silent dust. Utnapishtim listens patiently, and his response is a profound and somber reflection on the nature of life and death. He tells Gilgamesh that the search for eternal life is a futile one, that death is a part of the divine order, a fate that all mortals must face. He speaks of the god's decision to create both life and death, and that one cannot exist without the other. To illustrate this point, he shares his own story, a story that is not a tale of heroic conquest, but of obedience, loss, and a divine accident. This is the story of the Great Flood, a narrative that echoes through many cultures and religions. Utnapishtim begins by describing his life in the city of Shuruppak. The gods, he explains, grew weary of humanity's noise and decided to wipe them out with a flood. But the god Ea, who had a soft spot for Utnapishtim, revealed the god's plan to him in a dream. Ea instructed Utnapishtim to abandon his possessions, tear down his house, and build a massive ark, an immense ship to save a small portion of life on Earth. Utnapishtim obeyed, gathering his family, his craftsmen, and 2 of every living creature onto the vessel. The flood that followed was a cataclysmic event. Imagine the sky turning black, the storm raging for 6 days and 7 nights, a force so powerful that even the gods themselves were terrified and retreated to the highest heavens. The entire world was submerged in a watery abyss. After the storm subsided, Utnapishtim opened a hatch and saw nothing but the vast, silent ocean. The world of humanity was gone. The ark finally came to rest on the top of a mountain, and Utnapishtim sent out a dove, a swallow, and finally a raven to find dry land. When the raven did not return, he knew it was safe to disembark. He made a sacrifice to the gods, who, now remorseful, smelled the sweet aroma and gathered around. The god Enlil, who had initiated the flood, was enraged to find survivors. But Ea spoke on Utnapishtim's behalf, arguing that a more measured punishment should have been chosen. As a reward for his faithfulness, and as a way to resolve the conflict among the gods, Utnapishtim and his wife were granted immortality. After telling this incredible story, Utnapishtim offers Gilgamesh a test. He challenges Gilgamesh to stay awake for 6 days and 7 nights. It is a simple challenge, but a symbolic one, for if Gilgamesh cannot conquer sleep, the small death that comes every night, how can he ever hope to conquer the finality of death itself? Gilgamesh, exhausted from his long journey and filled with despair, immediately fails the test, falling into a deep sleep the moment he sits down. Utnapishtim, with a quiet sadness, watches as his guest sleeps, a silent confirmation of his mortal nature. Gilgamesh, having failed the simple test of staying awake, awakens from his deep sleep, his face flushed with the shame of his failure. Utnapishtim, with a gentle and understanding tone, reveals the truth. While he was sleeping, his wife had baked a fresh loaf of bread for each day he slept, placing it at his head. The bread, now stale and moldy, is proof of his mortal weakness. There can be no denying it. Gilgamesh is, and always will be, a mortal man. But Utnapishtim, seeing the profound grief and the long journey Gilgamesh has undertaken, takes pity on him. He decides to give him one last slim chance at something akin to immortality. He reveals the existence of a magical plant that grows at the bottom of the sea, a thorny rose-like plant that, when eaten, can restore a man's youth. It will not grant immortality, but it will grant a new beginning, a chance to live again. Filled with a renewed sense of purpose, Gilgamesh takes the ferryman Urshanabi with him and ties stones to his feet to sink to the bottom of the ocean. He finds the plant, a painful, stinging rose, and cuts it from its root. He does not eat it immediately. His plan is to bring it back to Uruk, to his people, and to share its rejuvenating power with them. This is a crucial turning point in Gilgamesh's character arc. He is no longer acting out of selfish ambition or a desperate fear of death, but out of a selfless desire to help his community. He has learned from his journey that true greatness lies not in personal glory or immortality, but in serving others. As they begin their long journey home, traveling across the vast, empty landscapes, Gilgamesh stops to bathe in a cool spring. He places the precious plant on the shore, believing it to be safe. But while he is in the water, a snake, smelling the plant's intoxicating fragrance, slithers out of a crevice, steals the plant, and eats it. As it eats, it sheds its old skin and is reborn, a symbol of its newfound youth. Gilgamesh is devastated. The last hope of cheating death, of finding a way around the mortal condition, is gone forever. His final moment of triumph is snatched away by a simple twist of fate. Dejected and broken, Gilgamesh and Urshanabi continue their long walk back to Uruk. But as they approach the city, a profound shift occurs within Gilgamesh. He is no longer filled with despair. As he stands once more on the great walls he helped build, he points them out to Urshanabi. He speaks with a newfound pride and acceptance. He is not a god who lives forever, but he is a king who built a magnificent city. His name, he realizes, will be remembered not because he was immortal, but because of his actions, his adventures, his friendship, and his grand legacy. The walls of Uruk, the very symbols of his early tyranny, are now the symbols of his enduring achievement. The epic ends not with a victory over death, but with a quiet, profound acceptance of it. Gilgamesh returns to Uruk, accepts his role as a mortal king, and rules with wisdom and compassion until his final days. His story, inscribed on the clay tablets we rediscovered, is the true monument to his legacy. It is a story that has outlasted his physical life by thousands of years. It is a story of a hero who was both a god and a man, who learned that true immortality lies not in escaping death, but in living a life that is worthy of being remembered. And as the story comes to a close, we too can find comfort in this ancient wisdom. The sun has set on the ancient world, and as you drift into a peaceful slumber, the legacy of Gilgamesh, a story of friendship, loss, and the ultimate acceptance of life's beautiful, fleeting nature, lives on. Sweet dreams.